I'm the new student council president. Kuse-senpai smiled in satisfaction as he greeted us. I just want to say again that I'm looking forward to working with you. Sure. The president's words carried a different weight than he intended, since we all knew he wouldn't be working with us, so much as leaving the majority of the work to us. The previous student council had for the most part finished their work, and the new student council would be taking up the baton starting today. Tuko and I had officially joined their numbers as officers. Tuko should have just gone straight to becoming student council president. Oh, you comedian. Kuse-senpai flapped his hand at me, as if to wave off my joke, although I wasn't really joking. It was May, and our vacation was over. The student council election held early in the new term resulted in the election of Kuse-senpai as president. Obviously, if someone who had barely shown his face in the student council was going out of his way to become president, his motive must be to make his school records look good. In fact, he didn't even try to hide it. Still, I had suspected that Kuse-senpai would win, since he seemed to be a popular candidate. That was mainly thanks to Nanami Toko, who had trailed behind him, helping with election work. Most students noticed her more than the actual candidate. Toko said quite a few eyes had also been on me, but if that was the case, I certainly didn't notice. It seemed that no one cared about Kuse-senpai's motives, but that was hardly unusual. To put it bluntly, no matter who the student president was, there wouldn't be any major changes in the school. A half-baked president wouldn't worsen students' individual troubles. Just as capable presidents wouldn't make their lives any easier. The student council didn't have enough power to meddle in an individual student's daily affairs. And since it didn't matter who the president was, it was difficult to care much about it. Considering all of that, the most important factor that determined who someone would vote for was the impression they got of the candidate. It was all about whether they were handsome or pretty, whether they had a lot of presents, or even whether their name was particularly interesting. And when it came to the people who were working for the candidates, there had been one person beautiful enough to catch everyone's attention. That impression was strong enough to deal the final blow in the vote. In my opinion, at least, that was the reason Kuse-senpai was elected president. So we only got 2 new members this year, huh? These 2 are more than enough. They're such hard workers. One of the upperclassmen looked at Tuko and I in turn. I'll be able to bring someone new next year, though. Well, if he comes to this school, anyway. One of your underclassmen, President Kuso? Tuko and I looked at each other. I could just picture a doppelganger of the president's carefree face appearing next to him. We better not get our hopes up then, I observed. Tuko smiled vaguely. She never allowed her friendly demeanor to break down. I see, I thought. She really would make a great president. Sayaka-chan, Tuko, I think you'd have an easier time next year if you also invited some underclassmen. If you have any, that is. One of the upperclassmen advised us. I wondered if she didn't have any prospective underclassmen recruits herself. Maybe most people just weren't interested, unless they wanted to make their school records look good, like Kuse-senpai. That's when I realized why Tuko had been so pleased about me joining. I never really talked to my underclassmen much. What about you, Sayaka? I went to Tomosomi for junior high, so none of my underclassmen will come here, I'm sure. My friends from elementary school had made even less of an impression on me. I might not even recognize them if I saw them. There was one person I couldn't forget, but if anything, I doubt she would want to talk to me. Tomosumi, the one that's both a junior high and a high school. Yeah, if she knew about it. She probably knew what kind of school it was, too. It was unusual for someone to move to a different high school when they went to a combined junior high and high school. I could tell based on her demeanor that Toko was questioning why I chose to come here. Commuting by train was more trouble than it was worth. I recycled the lie I had told my parents. Then I made a mental note that I had done so, to make sure I never contradicted that lie. Oh, I see. Behind the short response, I wondered how much Toko had guessed. Even if she had noticed my lie, though, she didn't pry any further into my secrets. The same way I never pried into hers. It was like we were always peeking out at each other from safe inside our respective burrows, and I felt doubt that almost bordered on panic over whether I wanted things to stay that way. What did I want to be with Toko? What did I seek between us? If I knew my answer, I couldn't stay at a standstill forever. The president and second years were talking with each other. There was a silent expectation in the air that someone should make tea for everyone. In a situation like this, the underclassmen like Toko and I would normally be the ones to do it. It wasn't as though it was an assigned duty, though, so one of us tended to take on the task through impulse or silent agreement. How about we decide who makes tea with rock, paper, scissors? I wouldn't have really minded doing it myself, but I felt a small compulsion to try doing something like this with Toko. I wanted to act like friends, that was all. But Toko's reaction was more dramatic than I had anticipated. She seemed surprised at herself too, and quickly explained as though she were trying to save face. It's just that I'm bad at rock, paper, scissors. You are? I wondered if there was even such a thing as being good or bad at it. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'm just too easy to read. She loosely waved her fist, smiling awkwardly. For some reason, something about it felt artificial to me. Well, now I really want to play it with you. I went along with it. If she wanted to hide something, then I would let her. You're so mean. Toko's mouth softened. She seemed somewhat pleased as she slowly held her fist out in front of her. I couldn't see what move she would choose, based on observing her hands and shoulders. It wasn't as though paper or scissor were written all over her face either. She wasn't easy to read at all. Nanami Toko was still a mystery to me. I readied my hand by thrusting it out. Just before we started, Toko absent-mindedly looked at her own hand. Rock. Toko's arm went up and down weakly. Paper. Up and down, up and down. Scissors. I threw paper, and Toko scissors. Victory. For Toko, that is. I looked carefully at our hands and made sure of it. I really had lost. You're not bad at this at all. I wondered if she was being modest when she said she was bad. At that moment, I was sure I looked ridiculous. Toko's eyes were fixed on my open fingers. Yeah, or maybe you're just even worse than I am, Sayaka. Now that's a mean thing to say so casually. Though she had won, Toko's fingers were bent half-heartedly, still in the loose shape of scissors. She pulled back her hand and stood up. Are you okay with black tea? But I'm the one who lost. Now that I think about it, you made tea last time. I couldn't make you do it again. Toko laughed lightly and headed towards the kettle. What was the point then? Left behind. My paper drifted in mid-air with no place to go. I hesitated over whether to go help her, but decided to observe her instead. Toko didn't falter as she prepared the tea with her back to me. She worked briskly, but it was like she was detached from her consciousness, moving almost mechanically. I wondered what inner conflict she was dealing with at that moment. She was her usual self on the surface, but there was something subtly different about her. It seemed unusual for someone to have an emotional attachment to rock, paper, scissors. But Toko clearly had no intention of showing anyone what was bothering her. I'm sure she had her reasons, but I wanted her to share those reasons with me. I wondered what I needed for that to happen. Trust? Friendship? Or was it love? After a while, Toko finished preparing everyone's tea and came back. After putting down the cups in front of the second years, the president included, she headed over to me, delivering me a hot mug of tea with her usual smile. Thank you. I'll do it next time. Uh-huh. I guess there was no point to playing rock, paper, scissors. Toko shook her head lightly. She sat back down in the seat and put her hands on her forehead, parting her bangs, and then let out a large sigh. In that moment, I felt like her carefully maintained attitude relaxed very slightly. It was a small vulnerability that I'm sure most people would have missed if they weren't always paying attention to Toko, like I was. When I saw that, I knew that Toko really had been trying to hide something. I knew it. I kept my attention on Toko until we quietly finished our assigned work for the day. Sayaka, can I talk to you about something? After we finished clearing away the materials we had been passed along, Toko spoke to me. She was smiling, back to her usual self. What was that about earlier then? In any case, it was easier to talk with her when she was this way. Okay. I could never turn down an invitation from Toko. We left the student council room together. Toko led the way to the bench behind the student council building. It was a useful location, since people rarely came there. Toko and I could be alone together, just by ducking behind its wall. I brushed off the bench, gathered up my skirt, and sat down. I had seen a bee flying near the student council room earlier, so I was extra cautious of my surroundings. I'd never been stung by one before, so I was all the more afraid of the potential pain. Besides, the buzzing sound of the rapidly beating wings always put me on edge. This is the opposite of before, isn't it? Toko smiled as she referred to both the order in which we sat on the bench and who invited who. Before, I'm used to myself, as I remember the cloudy sky from that day. We certainly were sitting in opposite positions compared to then. The only constant was the distance between us. Maybe we should go into town and chat over tea once in a while. I wondered if Toko had blurted that out, because the sun still felt warm on our skin, even if we sat in the shade. The early summer had started to pour over us, and not a single cool breeze visited us under the cover of the trees. Let's do that next time then. I was happy to spend more time with Toko after school, but I would prefer to keep hanging out separate, from this kind of conversation. So, what did you want to talk about? I could think of 3 prospects for what Tuko might want to talk about. I wondered which it would be. If it were completely outside of my expectations, I would have trouble responding. Tuko looked me over and then turned to the front, averting her eyes from me. So, I've been wanting to ask you this for a while, Sayaka. Have you ever eaten fast food? The past I had put behind me replayed in my mind. Before I could get angry, I burst out laughing instead. You're not the first person to ask me that. Do I look like that much of a rich girl? More or less. What about you, Toko? I almost said. But when I looked at her, I felt it couldn't be the case. Toko looked incredibly elegant, but it didn't feel like she came from high status. She had an easygoing friendliness about her, and an undeniably good attitude towards people. I wondered if there was something I was missing. I see. It must be the way my family brought me up, and all the lessons I took. This wasn't an answer to Toko's question, but it was the environment I'd been raised in. It was the cradle that I'd been given to guide me from childhood to adulthood. I couldn't deny the fact that it made me into the person I am now. Lessons. So that's how you did the thing for the student council election. Yeah, using the results of my calligraphy practice, I had written President Kusu's full name out in large script. If you want to run for the election next year, I'll be happy to do it again. Nanami Toko. I was sure that I would practice her name countless times at home before writing the final version. You're so dependable. When Toko complimented me, I felt there had been a point to learning calligraphy after all. I was sure that my other lessons would also gain meaning in the same way, sooner or later. I was looking forward to that very much. Toko, who had been closing her eyes, opened them and shaped rock, then paper, then scissors, one at a time with her hands. When you play rock, paper, scissors, people tend to use the same move most of the time, right? Right. I reflected back on our game as I agreed. I hadn't thought very hard before I put out paper, almost as though I was simply reaching for Toko. I think there probably aren't many people who change what they put out for rock, paper, scissors, based on the other person. You just start with the move you like the most. For me, that's scissors. I put out scissors right away. I wonder why. Toko raised her index finger and middle finger in the shape of scissors, gazing through the gap between them as if she was looking for something. I didn't really have an answer for her question. An expert of some kind might have been able to explain it, but it was likely that Toko wasn't seeking a scientific explanation. She unfurled the rest of her fingers. I guess I should have put out paper instead, she murmured to herself. There was a hint of self-deprecation hidden in her smile. What do you mean? Oh, nothing. Don't worry about it. Toko withdrew her hand. That's easier said than done. If she was going to keep hinting at things while refusing to actually tell me, I would have preferred she bury it deeper, in a place where no one would ever see it. My grades would be at risk again if Toko took up any more of my thoughts. Still, I didn't want to distance myself from her. Sorry, Toko apologized to me. I couldn't bring myself to give an understanding response like, it's fine. So I just gave a vague, mm-hmm. The silence that followed reminded me of the buzz of an approaching insect's wings. Does the garden at your house look like this, Sayaka? Tuko asked at last, looking at the scene in front of us. No, it's not nearly this disorderly. Disorderly, you say? And sometimes the cats come out. Cats are great. Tuko took the bait. So she liked cats too. I felt relieved that we had that in common. I'd like to go over to your house to pet your cat sometimes, Sayaka. You're welcome to any time. It seemed like I would have to be the one to bring it up. So, what did you really want to discuss? Is it a difficult topic? We weren't really getting to the point, so I tried to infer based on the mood. Nanami Toko was always confident in her actions, never timid. Her friendly nature gave me that impression, at least. But maybe she could be confused or hesitant at times, just like any normal person. What did I mean by normal person, anyway? Did I think Toko was so special that she was beyond human? But I suppose I really did feel that way about her, ever since she stole my heart at first sight at the entrance ceremony. I've thought of her as someone who was always walking ahead of me. Not necessarily, but you might think it's a little weird. A little weird? I wonder what exactly Toko considered weird. Perhaps this was a good opportunity to find out. And if she was going to be weird, then I needed to balance it out by being straightforward. In that case, I listen to you seriously. Being serious is my speciality, after all. I was confident in my ability to keep a consistent stance once I'd made up my mind. Toko accepted my attitude and broke into a smile. I like how straightforward you are, Sayaka. Thanks. Even this casual statement that she liked something about me made my heart flutter like paper blown in the wind. I don't think this topic is that intense, though. Toko gave me a wry smile, one that reminded me of trees resisting a gale. She put her fists on top of her knees and looked at me. You asked me before whether there was something I wanted to do by joining the student council, right? So that's it. The second prospect that I had come up with was correct then. Toko said, what I want to do in the student council is put on a play. A play? At first, I wasn't sure whether I had heard her correctly. The two ideas didn't seem connected at all, until Toko explained. A theatrical drama organized by the student council officers. I want to put it on at the culture festival. There was an entirely unexpected request. Just as she had prefaced earlier, it was a weird topic indeed. If someone wanted to put on a play, they would normally join the drama club. Didn't our school have one? Why a play with a student council? There must be some special reason why it had to be through the student council then. Because it apparently used to be a tradition. I wondered how long ago that must have been, and how Toko knew about it so soon after starting school here. I already had my doubts after this brief exchange, but first, I felt I should hear Toko out until the end. And you want to revive that tradition? I wouldn't call it as big as revival, but it's just Don't you feel like doing something grandiose now that we joined the student council? Otherwise, I feel like we're going to spend 2 years doing nothing but organizing documents. Toko glanced at the student council room. Other than the election, we certainly had only been doing clerical work since entering the student council. There would probably be some more behind the scenes work to do in the future, but evidently, Toko wasn't satisfied with that. So, this is sort of like how sport clubs have tournaments. I suppose it's similar to that. It's always easier to find something to do when you have a goal. Toko was committed and energetic. She certainly didn't seem to be harboring some inner obsession. Still, I had to wonder. It seemed plausible, but I also felt as though she was going about something in a roundabout way. Was this shallow of me? To think that she should have joined the sports club from the start, if all she wanted was to achieve a goal. I'd like you to help me with that, Sayaka. So, what do you say? Her humble smile and voice sought my answer. A play, huh? I felt like refusing at first. Theatre wasn't normally my thing, and I doubt that I could ever aspire to the stage at my present level of connection to it. Besides, tradition or not, I still couldn't see a link between the student council and putting on plays.